Good afternoon. I'm Jesse Milan. I'm the president and CEO of AIDS United, and it's my pleasure to welcome you and to thank you for joining us for the fourth webinar of AIDS United series, Relief, Recovery, and Resilience. We're sharing how communities impacted by and organizations focused on HIV are responding to the unprecedented situations in our world today that have been sparred by COVID-19. AIDS United created this webinar series as a space for the field and for our communities to come together. That's because the role of convener is one that AIDS United holds dear. We hope that these webinars will highlight examples of the resiliency, the adaptability, and the care with which our community is responding to COVID-19. But we can't gather together in any sense or in any space as HIV advocates, especially at this time when we know that so much strife and anguish is happening because of racial justice. It is long and well known by the HIV community, and it's reflected and exacerbated by COVID-19 disparities and by recent examples of police violence and the murders of Black people. I ask that we hold a moment of silence for Black lives lost prematurely due to medical racism, to state-sanctioned violence, and to white supremacy culture. And I urge that we all recommit to ending these social ills, starting within our own work. Let's take a moment. Thank you all. Now, this webinar in particular promises to be an excellent resource for our community by providing information to HIV-focused organizations on transitioning in-person events and fundraisers to virtual gatherings. I will be sharing later about the process we went through at AIDS United regarding our AIDSWatch, transitioning it to a virtual event. And my colleagues will be sharing about their own experiences hosting virtual events, including transitioning fundraising events to virtual. We will highlight some best practices for engaging large audiences in virtual settings and share tips and strategies for successful virtual fundraisers. But to get us started, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today. That's Zach Ford. Zach is a senior program manager at AIDS United, where among other things, he focuses on harm reduction. Zach, thank you for leading us today, and please take it from here.
Thank you so much, Jesse, and thank you for getting us started today, and welcome everyone. I'm very excited that everyone was able to join us today to talk about this. As Jesse said, I am a senior program manager at AIDS United. I oversee our harm reduction portfolio, including the Syringe Access Fund. And something that's come up with our grantees this year is that folks are struggling with fundraisers, with holding events because they can't do it in person. And I know that a lot of our grantees are smaller grassroots coalitions and organizations that really rely on in-person events, that rely on going to different events around town for nonprofits, where they're able to talk to the community about their work, they're able to get support for their work and raise funds for it. So folks are having to transition into this new virtual space of holding these events. And so we've put together what I think is a really fantastic group who has a bit of experience transitioning from in-person to virtual. And so I'd like to take a moment to let our panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start with Adrien.
Hi, I'm Adrien Lawyer. I use he pronouns, and I am the co-director at the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico. We are a statewide organization headquartered in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We've been around since 2008, and our work entails direct service provision, advocacy work, and education. So we are here just to help trans and non-binary folks in any way that we can throughout the state of New Mexico. But we also operate a drop-in center here in Albuquerque that's providing services to our most impacted community members. In terms of advocacy, we do policy work. We write or review trans policy for entities all around our region, and we do legislative advocacy as well. And in terms of education, we provide transgender cultural fluency trainings to any audience that will let us come and train them. So in 10 years, we've provided more than 1,400 of these trainings to medical professionals, behavioral health, law enforcement, public safety, educators, employers, faith communities, you name it. Thank y'all so much for having me today. I'm really happy to be here.
Great. Thank you, Adrien, and thanks for joining us. Lee?
Hi, everybody. I'm really excited and happy to be part of this important conversation with AIDS United today. My name's Lee Storrow. I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina AIDS Action Network and use he, him pronouns. We're the nonprofit based in North Carolina that leads and mobilizes on issues around HIV treatment and prevention, along with viral hepatitis. Been in existence as an organization for about 10 years, primarily doing advocacy work before our state legislature, before the governor's office and administration, along with some federal policy work that we do in partnership with AIDS United. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks so much, Lee. Glad you could join us. Mamie?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mamie Jackson-Williams. I'm the Vice President of Development at Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, D.C., and I would be remiss if I did not share she, her, hers, excuse me. I've been with the affiliate for almost 4 years now, and we provide healthcare in the D.C. metro area. For our affiliate, that includes, of course, D.C., 2 counties in Maryland, which would be Prince George's County, and Montgomery County, and all of Northern Virginia. I am happy and appreciate the opportunity to be with everyone here today and to talk about one of my favorite things, raising money to support wonderful causes and missions and purpose. So thank you for having me.
Thank you all so much. So for those that are joining us, this is going to be a really kind of like an open conversation between our panelists. I have a few questions that I'll be posing. Some of these questions participants were able to submit as they were registering, so thank you so much to those that submitted questions. We're going to talk for about an hour, just under an hour with our wonderful panelists. We have 4 questions, and then we're going to open it up to audience Q&A. So definitely, as folks are talking, if questions come up for you, please feel free to submit those through the chat box, and I will be reading those off near the end of our time together. So to get us started, each of you, our panelists, has led a virtual event or virtual fundraiser for your organization since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. What was that experience like? What challenges did you face? And what successes did you have? And Adrien, why don't you get us started?
Okay, great. So the pivoting that we had to do this spring was brought about because our annual gala had to be canceled. It's in April, the last Sunday in April, we hold an afternoon tea party, which has been a really fun thing. We've been doing that for a couple of years now and are excited to try to get some traction with creating a tradition around it. But this year, obviously, everything got thrown off really badly. And at first, our board, we started to think about, should we postpone it? Should we maybe try to do it in the fall instead? That's often a really beautiful season here in Albuquerque to still do things that are outdoors in the fall. But we were just so concerned, and we saw other events in the fall and conferences and things that were getting canceled already in April. So we were concerned about what would happen if we postponed it and then had to cancel it again. You know, what was that gonna be like in terms of fundraising efforts? And also, you know, we really wanted to make a value statement around the safety of our community and our supporters and not putting people in danger by bringing them into an in-person event in that way if it wasn't going to be safe to do it. So we went ahead and made the decision to go ahead and cancel our gala. And then we just, as a group, our board and our executive leadership turned to a social media campaign to raise money. We just used some really simple graphics. We have a really great communications person on contract with our organization, and she's really gifted at creating these very simple but you know, really high impact infographics and things that are just the right size and right amount of text for social media. So we were able to just have all of our board share that with their personal lists, All of us shared it on our personal page. Our organizational page pushed it out probably for 3 weeks or so, and we were able to turn that into a $10,000 fundraiser.
I can go ahead and talk a bit next about some of our challenges and thinking through around fundraising this spring. So our organization, NC AIDS Action Network, usually holds about 2 major fundraisers, one in the spring and one in the fall. Fairly traditional house parties, asks a host to host in their home, bring together about 50 to 70 of our supporters. And of course, we had one of those events planned for May. And just felt as the pandemic moved forward that it became very clear that that event wasn't going to happen. Of course, now that we're having this conversation in July, we're also figuring out that we're obviously not going to be having our similar event we normally hold in the fall in person either. But so the calculus we sort of made at the start of the pandemic was we really don't know what's going to happen, and that this really could have a major impact on fundraising over the course of this year and into the years ahead. And I think, unfortunately, I don't know that we have any better information now than we did back in the spring. But one thing we decided to do just to try to stay creative and to start thinking through options and to make sure we had other revenue streams was to think about a more low-key event we normally host. Historically, a group of college students in the Masters of Fine Arts program at UNC Chapel Hill host an event for NCAN called Broadway Twisted. It's a cabaret evening performance at a bar and music venue space in Chapel Hill, where actors and singers sing Broadway show tunes, but with the intention that gender's flipped, or that you play a little bit with gender. So the actors singing a song of a gender or an orientation that they might not normally have had the opportunity to sing on stage. It's always a fun event, not necessarily one of our biggest money raisers, but as we were thinking about how to do something virtually, we kind of kept coming back to that event. It's something that's really fun, it's something that's really engaging, and we thought there might be some opportunities to record at-home videos or things like that. So over the course of a couple months, we're able to reconnect with some of the former performers, which actually wound up being a gift in and of itself, that we were able to engage alums of UNC Chapel Hill who were working on Broadway, who were working in New York, and have them virtually participate. In fact, the 2 folks who wound up hosting our event were both living in New York and alums of the program, which was kind of cool. And we're able to put an evening together that wound up being really fun, raise some money, and can talk about the specifics of that later on in the conversation. And, I think brought us all together through a fun Facebook Live concert. So we're thrilled we were wound up being able to do it, learned a little bit, made some mistakes, but we're glad we were intentional to try to keep thinking about these creative options to keep fundraising going.
Mamie. So at our affiliate at Planned Parenthood, PPMW, we ended up doing 2 virtual events. We were in the midst of planning our gala, and we are still in the midst of planning gala after being rescheduled twice and realizing it needed to be a virtual event that will be happening in the next month or so. But there were 2 that we decided to go ahead and do. One was a brunch for our Planned Giving Society. And this was not a fundraiser. This was just a stewardship event that we turned into a virtual brunch. It was challenging in the sense that it was an event that was already in the making. And then within a 2-week time span, we turned it into a virtual event. And for most of us who are familiar with Planned Giving, the audience is a little bit more mature. So trying to take our fabulous supporters who are probably 70 and older for my particular constituency, it was a little stressing to see if we could get them to get on the platform and so forth. So we did a couple of things like doing test runs with them. We had kind of like an office hour where we asked, okay, if you want help in learning how to get in on this tool and platform, give your fundraiser a call and we'll kind of walk you through it before the event. One nice touch that we added, and we were talking offline, all of us on the panel, And Lee, someone mentioned, oh, you're sending some goodies out, some food out, so that must be your Southern charm. Maybe that's why I have keep sending food out to my people. I'm a Southern gal, and that's what we do. So we sent a variety of scones and tea to our Plain Giving folks ahead of this brunch, and they loved it. It was a nice little touch. We were just really 2 weeks after COVID had kind of gone COVID, and so it was just a well welcome for that event. It was a great opportunity for our CEO to give an update. So I think it was more timing on our side than anything, because we had a great turnout because people really wanted to hear what was going on. So we had our CEO give an update, and we had some of our clinicians get on the phone. The second event that we did, which was just last week, was a fundraiser, a cocktail event. Typically, this is an event where we have over 250 people attend, and we net a nice size of funds raised. In this regard, for this one, we had 70 people show up, and we still netted the same amount of money. So that was awesome, and it wasn't so much work. The heavy lifting in this regard was us making sure that we kept connected with our people and just informing them that this event was happening, that it was, a new platform, a new way of doing this event. And instead of selling tickets, we just kept it at the sponsorship level. And I think that's really what made it a successful event for us.
Wow, thank you, Mamie. This is Jesse from AIDS United, and so many of you who are dialing into today's webinar know that AIDS United sponsors every year AIDSWatch. It usually happens in the spring, and this year AIDSWatch was scheduled for March 30th and 31st. Well, March, of course, was the first month where we all began fearing that the pandemic was in fact in our backyards. In fact, on March 6th, on Friday, March 6th, I had just attended a meeting of the Dean's Advisory Council for the School of Public Health at the University of North Carolina at UNC. And one of our council members is the former president of the National Association of State Epidemiologists. And he gave a huge warning to the council on that Friday that the pandemic was coming and we had to take it seriously. So when I got back to the office on Monday, I was very concerned that AIDSWatch was really not going to happen, because it was only literally 3 weeks away. And by the 10th of March, I've made the decision that we needed to transition AIDSWatch to an all virtual event. AIDSWatch is where we bring grassroots advocates in the HIV community to Washington to meet with Congress to advocate. And in the last couple of years, we've had 650 people attend AIDSWatch. And so disappointing them and our funders was my greatest concern. I think our biggest challenge for us was that it was March and we had to make a pivot very fast and give as much notice as possible to not only those who were attending, but the challenge was making sure that none of our sponsors were going to back out if we changed to a virtual event. And the other challenge was whether we might end up taking a financial bath on all the contracts we had with our caterers and with the hotel where the event was going to happen. So we immediately began contacting all of the above. I was so gratified that our lead sponsor, our largest donor, the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, responded on a dime and said, "Thank you. This is so wise, and we'll probably follow your lead with our gala that's coming up in 2 months." And so that was very gratifying. And the first phone call I made was to the CDC itself. And I talked to a very high-ranking official that we all know, and found out that, yes, it would make a lot of sense to make an immediate change for going to an all virtual event. So our staff worked really hard, our meeting planners worked really hard to renegotiate those contracts. And we gave as much notice as we could to the community that we were in fact changing to an all virtual event. And I think that that was the first major challenge, making sure that our sponsors and our vendors and the hotel contractors, et cetera, were all going to be reasonably supported to make sure that we were not going to take a major financial hit on the transition.
Yeah, thank you all so much. One thing that was brought up that really resonated with me is the ability to really reach out to folks who maybe you traditionally wouldn't have been able to bring because of the cost of travel and lodging, or maybe even speaker fees. But now that we're all stuck at home, none of us have anywhere to go. So the ability to have folks join virtually that you maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity to bring in before, I think is really, really cool. And Lee, I know you mentioned that there were several missteps that were made along the way. Would you mind elaborating on that and sharing what some of those were?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a bit about that. I mean, I think the biggest thing we learned, and in some ways, I think this was the really early stages of these virtual events. So in some ways, I think there was also a little bit of room, right, for things to be a bit off in those first couple months. And still really probably is now, right? Like, I think we've probably got a while to keep making the jokes happen about learning and growing about technology. But I do think for us, the technology piece, I wish we'd sort of landed our specifics on that sooner. Our original vision for the event was modeled sort of after what we saw one of the national organizations doing. The Actors Fund hosted a virtual night that Rosie O'Donnell hosted, where she bopped back and forth into colleagues' homes and famous Broadway stars and had them sing songs and raise money for the Actors Fund. And so our first reaction was to think about doing it live. And the further we got along in the planning, I think we realized that that was just pretty near impossible for an org of our size and who had our infrastructure. You know, the technical challenges, the opportunity for internet not to be working was just really too great on that front. So it wasn't until really right before the event that we landed on having our two hosts be live and, you know, introduce our clips, host the raffle live, but ask all of our artists to do everything recorded. I think it wound up being a pretty seamless, you know, interaction, but I wish we'd been able to figure that out earlier in the process. The second piece is, I think, just, again, really give yourself the time with the technology once you land it. We used a platform called Be Live, which you can certainly research and find online. Did pay for a monthly subscription to that, which was about $20 a month, and use that to broadcast out to our Facebook page. I really recommend the platform. I will say our hosts and myself and our other staff member doing tech sort of, I think, were a little overly confident about how confident we were with it. Did like an hour of tech that day, and then like 5 minutes before the show started, realized we didn't have a couple things right and had to like scavenge in the last 5 minutes. We wound up starting a couple minutes late. The hosts wound up being able to sort of vamp and do some goofy stuff for a couple minutes. So I'd absolutely recommend, like, if you're thinking about a virtual event, get folks who can like roll with the punches, right? Like, make sure you have people who are assigned to do tech, because at one point the plan was that I was both going to be like doing the tech and hosting the event. And I think that would have been an absolute disaster. I could have been telling you about that horror story right now. But this is a new world for everybody, right? I think people are really forgiving about mistakes, but ideally you just don't make them, right? And give yourself way more time to research and understand the platforms that exist and know what those limitations are before diving into it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lee. And so Lee, you kind of started touching on this. Oh, Jesse, did you have
No,
something?
I think Lee makes a very good point, because I can tell you I was lying awake night on end leading up to AIDSWatch without the technology, and it may very well be a topic that we all want to talk about, but I think we have enough theater queens in our arena to know that anytime you're now doing one of these, it is a production. And so at AIDS United for AIDSWatch, we reached out to someone who we knew had the experience with the technology, Kenan Farrow from The Body, to be sort of the overall production manager of the entire event, to make sure that the technology worked and that all the major participants in all the plenary sessions were prepared. I cannot emphasize the importance of rehearsal, rehearsal, rehearsal. Just as Lee said, give yourself enough time to make sure everybody who's logging in, especially if they're a presenter, has everything they need, from the lighting to the backdrop to the microphone, and they know how to navigate back and forth. Because people will be forgiving, but mistakes that could have been avoided up front should be avoided up front. And I think having that overall technical manager or technical producer whose responsibility is only that is really helpful.
And Jesse, I agree. Even when it's a small event, and ours have been small, we did probably 3 rehearsals with the team because it was a bunch of fundraisers trying to figure out the tech stuff. And so we just wanted to make sure that we were comfortable, the folks on the panel were comfortable. We did briefings where we ran through kind of how the talking points, what the timing was going to be. So whether it's large or small, I think that's key, because at the end of the day, it is a production.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And we will, so though we're going to talk a little bit more about tech in a few minutes. I am curious to get y'all's take, and this was one of the questions that came in, and I think it applies to this conversation. You know, at this stage in the pandemic, when we've all been sitting in front of our computer screens for so long every day, when, you know, family gatherings, personal things are all done through our computer screen, and we're all on video conferences all the time. Do y'all have any thoughts or recommendations around, or even things that maybe you did for some of your virtual events around addressing that fatigue that comes with, you know, what we've heard identified as Zoom fatigue that comes with this new reality of work, and kind of addressing that with your potential event attendees, and, you know, whether that's building in breaks or you know, kind of cutting down the number of hours you do in a certain day. Any advice or strategies around that?
I'll say that for us, that was kind of, I mean, we weren't so deep into all of this Zooming yet when we did our campaign, but that was a little bit of the thinking around why not to do a virtual event and instead to just try to do a campaign. Because we knew we had a lot of folks who would help us to signal boost and push it out and tag people and really help get that word out. So it wasn't time limited. You know, we were able to keep the campaign running until we reached our fundraising goal, and we weren't limited to just that, you know, July 12th at 7 p.m. and who would or wouldn't show up to that. And it's interesting that we're talking about food, sharing food, because that was the other piece that we picked up, was to send out a mailer of a piece of mail, you know, nothing virtual, like an actual piece of mail with a tea bag and an invitation to like have the cup of tea that you would have had at the tea party with us and send this back with a donate, you know, send back the envelope with a donation. So we're going to hit the folks who just came to the tea parties that we have a mailing list for with that in another month or so. So we kind of combined a really broad virtual campaign with this very specific mailer. And again, that didn't limit us to people who were willing to attend something via technology and all of that.
Yeah, I'd really ditto that comment about mail. Like, I feel like I've seen this across multiple organizations, ourselves included, but you know, for a couple years, I think we were so focused on digital things that organizations weren't utilizing mail as much. And I think like mail is back in a lot of ways, right? Like there's a lot of research that's showing mailed traditional letter appeals are really big. I think the idea of mailing personal items to folks connected to your fundraiser feels really personal and feels really exciting when people are stuck at home. But I think on the general theme, like, I think the stuff that I'm seeing be, successful is what's innovative. I'm not sure anybody really wants to turn a traditional, dinner or luncheon or fundraiser into a 1.5 hour program on Zoom anymore, right? Like, I think that did sort of work for the first couple of months in March, April, and May. We did our event on Facebook Live, which I do think using Facebook Live and Instagram Live is kind of smart, because I think it helps get rid of that Zoom fatigue of people not feeling like they have to be on. But I just think we have to be really, really creative, and you have to be one step ahead of like the other idea. I've seen organizations doing drive-ins, which I think can be really clever and creative. I saw an organization that was intentionally hosting a drive-in, but even saying we're doing it at a location that's accessible on public transit, or if you want to use a bicycle, and we're going to set up a separate social distancing space for folks who aren't in cars. I saw a tweet chat fundraiser, and I think you've just got to keep pushing yourself to be like one step beyond what people are thinking about, because I think the fatigue right now is really real when folks' life is so isolated.
I agree. Even with and we're in the process of planning our gala, but we have a host committee, which is our group that's supposed to be out there rallying folks and getting them to tune in. And so we've been able to land a partnership with Founding Farmers, which is a restaurant conglomerate in the DC metro area. And so they're going to sponsor meals for us, curate meals for us for the night of our gala. And when I said that, like, my host committee was like, oh yes. And they're like, we can do this. And I was like, all around food again. But it was just a neat way to partner with the restaurant and have them create a meal for us. And we're going to run a contest where potential participants can decide what the dessert's going to be for that evening. So just kind of keeping it fun and lively, so we can kind of get ways to have people tune in the night of. So.
Yeah, these are really amazing ideas. Thank you all. So I'm curious if there's, in y'all's experiences with some of these virtual events or even campaigns outside of, social media campaigns or mailers or whatever it is, something outside of kind of the traditional in-person gathering that y'all have done, is there one thing that you wish you would have done differently, or that you'll do differently next time, or that you would change about what you did? And if so, what is that?
I think for us at AIDS United, looking back on AIDSWatch, we discovered very early in the opening plenary session that there was an entire separate event happening via chat. And because people are, still so distanced from each other, connecting even virtually in real time with, hey, New Mexico is here, hey, Brooklyn is here, and then there's all that. But then there are also the comments about what's being presented or what's happening in real time in the actual event. And I think looking back, it would have been wise to have someone monitoring all of that, so that there could be a real-time response to what was being said or what was being discussed on the chat. And I think over the last few months, as we've done additional webinars, our moderators have become very skilled at that. But the larger the event, probably the more important it is that you have someone monitoring that, and even collapsing different comments together that are on the same theme, so that the real-time panel, like we are doing today, can respond to a theme that's coming in from people watching live.
Yeah. What do others think? I mean, if there's one thing that you could do differently, or that you would do differently, or that you plan to do next time, what would that be?
Go ahead, Mamie.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, not waiting to the last minute, even though, I mean, in your mind, you feel like because it's virtual, that you can do it in a shorter amount of time, which you can, but that there's not as much planning that goes into it, which is not the case. And so the same amount of time you could give yourself for an in-person event, if you can allow yourself, give yourself as much time as possible, so everyone is comfortable, because this is new space for everybody. And so it's me being a slight control freak at times, having to kind of like say, I gotta let it go and trust that it will be done in the manner that it needs to be. And so just giving yourself time to emotionally take in what needs to happen and prepare for what's going to happen.
I'm not sure that this falls into this category exactly, Zach, so I'm sorry if this doesn't feel like a response to what you said, but I think for us, one of the things that we sort of agonized a little bit about was whether it was out of touch to ask for financial support at all when we did. We were struggling with people are losing their jobs and people are really afraid and they don't know what's coming. And then does it make us seem like we're incredibly insensitive to what's going on with the people that we work for, to then pop out with like, hey, send some money, send us some money, right? So we had to really tie the campaign to our work. And in particular, we tried to tie it to our work around the COVID response, that our drop-in center was staying open, that we were still providing services to our most impacted community members. The other thing I think for me is an ongoing sort of 10-year learning process around, the fact that our community wants to invest and buy into our work, where I think I've been a little bit tempted at times to say our community experiences so much employment discrimination, so much housing discrimination, so much discrimination and violence. Like, this is not the population that we should be asking for help from, because these are the people that we exist to help, but really they're not mutually exclusive, right? The community wants to support it. The community wants to support the organization. So for us, it's about kind of letting go of that idea that the people that our core trans community here in New Mexico isn't able to or isn't interested in supporting the work of the Trans Resource Center, because that has turned out not to be true over and over again. And what are we, what even kind of like are we inadvertently buying into if we think that way, instead of thinking of it as a grassroots movement?
Yeah, Adrien, that comment really resonated with me, because I think we felt similarly at the start of the fundraising effort. We plan to approach some of our past sponsors of our organization to ask them to make sponsorship gifts for Broadway Twisted. But I think we were always sort of, myself included, right, questioning, is it the appropriate time, how to do it? And I think people, you don't know people's individual circumstances, and there are absolutely ways to appropriately ask them for support, especially if they've been a past donor to your organization. And of course, be open to the circumstance, the timing isn't right? Something has happened with COVID. But my experience, and I think our experience, was that people, appreciated the update about the organization. They've been a past donor because they do believe in the mission. They do want a strong HIV advocacy response in our state. And so knowing that we were still here and that we were doing the work and that we had a special opportunity for them to donate, 90% of the calls were incredibly positive. And the couple where folks weren't necessarily able to do it right then were not bad at all. And so I think, you can't be too aggressive. You want to be appropriate, but I think it is our roles to champion our organizations and to champion our mission. And part of that is to raise the revenue to do that. And so I would absolutely, I think, have been more aggressive than we've been at the time around approaching our past sponsors. I think the other takeaway or lesson learned, and Jesse, I think, hit on this a little bit with the technology conversation earlier, like, I do wish we'd paid someone or figured out who the right person who really knew the technology just to come in and help us run it. That absolutely would have been money well invested, as opposed to kind of figuring it out on the fly with our staff and volunteers.
Yeah, thank you all so much. So I think that that transition lead to technology was perfect. I think we should, yeah, let's talk about technology. We've seen a lot of virtual events that utilize Zoom, which we're on right now, that use Facebook Live, that use Instagram Live. I'm curious if there are other interactive platforms that you all have utilized that work well for engaging groups, or are there features of the platforms I mentioned or any of the other platforms you use that you really like that you'd like to share with folks? And we can start anywhere.
We've just been a Zoom household at PPMW. It's worked for us. Moving forward to our gala, I'm not sure if we're going to use Zoom. We are going with a production company because this is one of our larger fundraisers, and we want it to feel like it's a production or slash television show. So I don't know right now. I'm waiting to finish up the conversations with the firm we're working with, Show Call. But Zoom has not let us down yet, and it has been user friendly for our technical skills within our office.
We use, of course, Zoom, but we also had Instagram and Facebook activities happening at the same time. But I discovered that because our event with Zoom was so successful, 2 other national organizations asked for our advice and met with our production manager about how, if you're going to do a really big event with hundreds and possibly thousands of attendees, what are the best platforms for doing so? Literally 2 months after AIDSWatch, the American Medical Students Association had transitioned its national conference to all virtual, and they used the same platform. And funders concerned about AIDS also reached out to our production manager about using the Zoom platform. One of the things I think that's helpful, and I think all of us who may have just gone through the International AIDS Conference, AIDS 2020, and the alternate conference of HIV 2020, discovered that the opportunity to get into breakout sessions, the opportunity to have social activities that are within a conference or event for a framework are really helpful. And if you're able to do those live, that would be really fantastic, because then you have people from different time zones and in different parts of the country getting together immediately in some sort of a social and learning context. That technology is really exciting.
So the platform that we used for Broadway Twisted, which I referenced earlier, is a platform called BeLive. I really do recommend it. As I mentioned, I wish we had a little bit more time to have planned that tech. There was a very stressful period about 5 minutes before where it seemed like something didn't work. And let me tell you, when you've been planning for an event for weeks and then it seems that the technology might not work 5 minutes before, is very stressful. Luckily, about 2 minutes before it did work. So there was just a minor snafu there. But it's a platform that I think, particularly if you're having a combination of live and pre-recorded content, works really well. So we were alternating between 2 live hosts, and then we had our major sponsor come on camera for a portion. Really easy functionality to move people in and out, and then go to the recorded videos. It seemed pretty clear that like recorded music videos via Zoom just wasn't going to have the quality that we were really looking for to do that well. And so BeLive, you can just record something on BeLive, or what we were doing was using BeLive and then linked to our Facebook page, or it can also link to YouTube. So if that's the style of event you're doing, I can't speak enough about the platform. We used it for a moderated chat we did on Facebook Live on Tuesday from our NCAN account. And certainly if folks have individual questions afterwards, I'm happy for folks to reach out to me about our experience with that platform specifically.
Great, thank you all. Jesse, something you said stood out to me about the like the social events and kind of the fun aspect of online events, which I think is a really challenging thing. But you know, I just wanted to bring up, I was volunteering with an organization here where I live in New York, and they were doing an online advocacy campaign. It was text banking around the city budget. And defunding the police and trying to get folks to attend like an online rally and different stuff. But they had a DJ for it, which was really fun. So everyone logged in, folks were on video, and while we're all doing the text banking, they had a DJ, like a local Brooklyn DJ that was playing music for everyone, and they had her on video, like doing the DJ thing, which was really, really fun and made it a great event. I was able to, like, at first I had my headphones on, then I took them off, and like my husband and I were both listening to it. And it was like a really fun evening doing some of this advocacy work, but also getting to hear like a local New York artist and hear some new music, which was really exciting. So I think there's a lot of creative things we can do to kind of make these spaces a little more fun, not feel so like work Zoom, but more of like an easier kind of going type of thing. So appreciate y'all talking about the technology pieces. I want to pivot really quickly. I know we've talked a lot about fundraising, but I want to kind of pivot to a question that came in through the chat that asked more about converting spaces into the virtual world for outreach to other organizations or to clients, you know, whether that's like, it can be, you know, like virtual support groups that your group offers, or something like that. Like, have any of y'all had experience with kind of transitioning some of your existing services into the virtual world and how that's gone?
We definitely have. We have about 11 different support groups that meet all throughout the month, and now they're all on the Zoom platform. And what we have learned from that has been really interesting to me, which is that, you know, certainly there are folks who don't want to do it or aren't able to, right? We have access issues around computer access and internet access, but what we have found is it actually provides better access to other folks, right? So we have, you know, like some members of our trans children's play group who were very reluctant to participate when we met in person at a park. I think they liked coming to the group, but they were always very nervous and shy to speak or participate. And on Zoom, that same kiddo has just like really moved forward and wants to like show things and talk about things. Since they're in their own space, in their own home, in their own room, they're just so much more comfortable and outgoing. So it's been a really interesting thing for us to see that Zoom has its limitations. And I know that phrase Zoom fatigue, every time I hear it, I feel it, you know, like, oh no, not Zoom again. But what we have found is that really that there's some kinds of access needs that get met better by Zoom. So it's been really instructive to us. And right now, it's hard to imagine a time when we will have support groups in a room again together, but I'm sure that day is coming. And for us, we're really trying to think about how can we maintain a hybrid model around this stuff and not just abandon Zoom when that time comes, because we've seen that for some people it's just so much better. So we really are trying to think about, like, could we do, you know, one meeting a month in person and one meeting a month on Zoom, or how can we, you know, make these things accessible to more people? Plus geographically, right? In a state like New Mexico, we have 3 main sort of population centers and then a huge rural area in the state. So a lot of folks aren't able to get to our support groups, but now they are able to. So for us, it's been, you know, there's been some really like amazing aspects of doing it this way, things that we didn't know that we would learn, you know, and then some other things that have been really obviously challenging and difficult about it.
Yeah, I know not all the folks on the call do direct service, but does anyone else who does or their organization does have any experience with pivoting some of those services from in-person to virtual?
Well, our education side of the house, they had to go all virtual. So they had to take time out and kind of reformat their education programming to find ways to deliver it virtually. And everything that you do in person doesn't automatically translate to virtual. And so they've come up with, we have a peer-to-peer class that we do. And so they've turned it into a one-on-one coaching class. So just, we found different ways to make it work for us. On our C4 side of the house, it's really worked in being able to inform folks. So typically at a C4 event, whether it was a fundraiser or just a rallying event, we may have 20 people. We just did one in May and we had 80 people, and they were new faces and names because people want to be able to just learn. So we found that, especially post-COVID, people just want to hear. They want to know what's going on, how can they help, how we've been able to be flexible and nimble in this space. And so that's where virtual has really worked for us, and reaching out to folks to inform them that, yes, we're still here, the doors are still open, and we're still servicing the community in new and different ways.
Zach, I see a question in the chat about clients getting comfortable using the software or even accessing Zoom. And to bring something from outside of the HIV community, but I chair the worship committee at my church, and we all transitioned to virtual church services back in March and April, and discovered that it was helpful by us offering a pre-service tutorial for people on how to use Zoom. I even did a tutorial on how to use Teams, because Teams is another system. And just giving people that hands-on, you're not stupid, you just don't know, you haven't been taught, is I think really helpful, particularly with clients and constituents, for all of us who simply don't live in the world that we do of Zoom every day. I did 11 meetings in one day. We're talking about people who may do one a week, and how do they get on it? What do they do? How do you change the gallery view? What does the mute mean? That can be really helpful if you give people that personal touch, like, here's a time for you to learn so that you can be like everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those tutorials are so helpful. And I know, just like, again, kind of like a more personal example, like we've been doing family dinners with we have, my husband's family, we're all here in New York, but none of us can see one another. And so we've been gathering regularly for Zoom dinners, and, this is really new technology for some members of the family. And so offering time to like walk them through it. This is how you get it on your cell phone. This is how you log on, goes such a long way. And people feel like more connected when they're able to do that and work it properly and be more engaged, rather than dealing with tech issues, which I think is such a great thing. I want to ask quickly, we had a question come in, and it's about charging for a virtual conference or a virtual event. And so I wanted to get the panel's thoughts on whether charging folks to attend a virtual event or virtual conference is something that you've seen, or something that you've done, something we should be doing or should think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I feel like there's a little bit of silence, but also laughter from the group, partially because I think it's hard, and I think it is like a little uncomfortable to figure out, right? Like a lot of the things that you might typically expect that people are paying for the right to go to a conference are probably not being provided, from a fundraising perspective, my instinct of what we've done and what I've seen done successfully is like, build your event to focus on major sponsorships, be they either wealthier individuals who have the ability to write a large personal check or corporate solicitation. And then maybe think about a separate mechanism in the event itself to get that lower dollar money in. During Broadway Twisted, so we focused on sponsorship, and then for the event itself, we had a raffle of about 8 items and did 2 drawings throughout the show, and brought in, I think, close to $1,000 just from raffle tickets and donations alone. So rather than charging for the experience itself, right, we created a mechanism throughout the event for folks to make donations. We are exploring, we're going to do a virtual small advocacy conference in the fall and are looking to provide a voluntary option for folks to donate and explain why, you know, what that money goes toward, why we appreciate their donation. And then are probably going to have a cap that about a week and a half before we end free donation and require folks to make a small contribution at that point. You know, I think that feels really fair. It feels equitable. It allows us to promote the event and really have a deadline, and helps us plan, right? Like, you do want to know, even in a virtual setting, right? Are you going to have 25 people or are you going to have 150? Because that might change how you structure things. So my instincts are for like an educational conference itself, I think it's really hard in this current time to charge. But I think if you think creatively, you can still probably think about some ways to bring that money in, and still be accessible.
I just know in communicating with other affiliates around the Federation with Planned Parenthood, it's kind of been a mixed bag in regards. Some affiliates are charging for tickets for attendance, some aren't, and some say it works, some say it doesn't. For us specifically at PPMW, we've just kind of kept it on the sponsorship level. You know, we haven't charged for individual ticket sales. And the response financially has pretty much been the same as if we had done the event in person and raised the money after you net out things. So, you know, I think it's still, the jury's still out on that. In regards for our gala that's coming up, it's great that none of our sponsors asked to be refunded. And so we're keeping that and moving forward. We really don't sell that many tickets, individual tickets to our gala. So we're going to try something different in that peer-to-peer fundraising space. So we're working with CauseVox and having our host committee members virtually host tables, and we're hoping this will really trickle down and resonate with a younger audience and get them involved to participate with our gala, which we really don't have that younger audience participate through galas. And so we're asking folks, you know, if you want to fund, let's say, an education class for a student at $75, you know, this is host your table for $75 and get your friends to chime in and help support. And then, so we have a menu of things. So hopefully it will help in broadening our reach. And I'm looking at this more about quantity versus getting the larger gift, but more gifts. So I'll keep you guys posted.
All right. So I want to pose a question, and I also want to remind folks that are tuning in that you can submit your questions through the webinar chat. You can submit them through the Q&A box. I've got both open and I'm monitoring. So as those come in, I'll pose those because we are kind of entering the official Q&A time. But I've also got a few more questions lined up that I can ask as well. But definitely, if there's things you want to ask, if there's specific things going on in your agency that you want advice on, please feel free to put those into the chat or the Q&A box. I'm curious, I know we talked a bit about Zoom fatigue, but I'm curious about folks' thoughts on just donor fatigue. I mean, we've seen, it's been a tough year, right? There's been a lot going on. You know, here we're specific, this is AIDS United's COVID response series. And so, you know, there's been so many different agencies and so many different causes and so many different issues that are desperately needing folks' support right now. And folks are kind of being pulled in different directions in terms of being asked to donate to different campaigns and different agencies. And so I'm curious for the folks here, if you've experienced any of that donor fatigue when you're doing some of these fundraisers and virtual events, that there's a reluctance to give, or that folks are kind of tapped out, or folks are uncertain about what the future looks like, the economy, things like that. Or if not.
I think donors, especially corporate and foundation donors, are as open as ever to supporting our mission, no matter what it is. If they've been your supporter in the past, I think that they feel a responsibility. This is certainly true for AIDS United as a funder, that we feel a responsibility to help organizations make it through this very difficult time. And it's not just time for a couple of months. It may be time that take us well into 2021 and possibly beyond. And if our public health infrastructure, which we are concerned about at AIDS United, is going to continue, it needs not-for-profit organizations to survive. And so being at least open to hearing each new opportunity that might be presented to us is one that I think all funders have to be. And in my own experience, I just responded to a funder who said, well, send me something right away about what you're planning to do, because we might be willing to support it. Just hearing that is reaffirming that we do have people and organizations and people in organizations who are going to make sure that funders try to do their part to keep us going and to support what we're doing in this difficult time. And I sent that letter today.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Zach, I alluded to this earlier as well. My experience, and again, these were conversations in April and May, so it's been a couple months, but I think folks who are used to making gifts to nonprofit organizations expect to still be asked, and they expect to still be communicated with, and they expect to still know what we're doing. And, you know, you always want to be thoughtful and respectful in those conversations. But, you know, I think, I don't think as right now that, you know, the fear of someone saying no should stop anyone from making a request to someone who supported your work in the past.
Other thoughts? Adrien or Mamie?
For us, you know, they're looking for us to ask, and our experience has been they will tell us if they can't, or they will tell us if it's not going to be as large or as big of a gift as they typically would, because we circled back around once, twice, maybe 3 times to some individuals that was up during this time. But I will say this has probably been one of our top fundraising years so far. We have 2 more months left in our FY, and we've exceeded goal. And so if you don't ask and you don't share the need and show the impact, you're not going to get. And so that's kind of what I've been sharing with my team and with our board, that we're not going to slow down. We have work to do, and we're not going to slow down because of things that are happening. There are people out there with needs. So
Yeah. Adrien?
That's been our feeling too. We haven't really encountered any different attitudes. I mean, if anything, people are more eager to make sure that we're able to stay open and provide the services that we do. And I would say our private foundation partners have uniformly been amazing. Just really, really flexible, really proactive, coming to us, you know, to talk about needs and solutions and technical assistance and what do we need. And it's just been really encouraging.
Great. That's exciting to hear. I'm glad. So we've got a couple questions that have come in. Keep them coming, folks. So the first one, how do the panelists manage simultaneous events? Do you do breakouts? Do you do completely separate meetings? And have you experienced any staffing or tech issues that folks should be on the lookout for?
Well, when we did AIDSWatch, we had a overall production manager for the entire event, but we had multiple workshops that were happening simultaneously. And we made sure that there was a on-the-ground moderator for each one of those workshops, whose job it was to make sure that all the panelists were prepared, all the slides were ready, and to help manage the chat, but making sure that everything for that one segment in a larger event was happening. And I think it also gave some comfort to the presenters that they had a go-to person in case there was a problem. And also I think it gave the organization a great deal of comfort that there was someone responsible for making sure that every piece and every breakout was going to be technically solid. And that was an entire team, and they all received the same training about what was needed and how to operate and how to connect with each other. So yes, it made things happen in real time in multiple locations, multiple virtual locations.
Are there other folks who have done kind of a larger event where you've needed to do breakouts or separate meetings? And if so, what was your strategy there?
We moved HIV Speaks on Jones Street, which is our statewide advocacy day, to a virtual event on Zoom in June. Did a morning program. It's a smaller version of AIDSWatch, in all honesty, just to describe the tone and tenure of the event. A morning program that was about an hour and a half on Zoom with everyone, and then did have breakouts with legislators and policymakers over Zoom, and did have a couple of those meetings happening at the same time. Rather than deal with the breakout function, we just asked a couple of peer organizations to let us use their Zoom account for the afternoon. It just felt like we didn't want to be dealing with people coming in to one link and being confused about how the breakouts functioned. And, again, for a smaller organization that didn't have a ton of technical logistics and staffing, that was actually pretty successful. And I think gave people real clarity. We were just very clear on folks' schedule, for your breakout sessions, this is the Zoom room to go to. And that worked pretty well. And similar to what Jesse alluded to, did ensure that we had an NCAIDS Action Network staffer, sort of facilitating and playing the point role for each of those meetings.
Yeah, I'm actually working on a virtual event that's going to take place in September related to the harm reduction work I do. And one of what we're planning is when you register, so it's a 2-day conference, and when you register, you select like the track that you want to follow, the sessions you want to attend, and then we put together a personalized agenda with a Zoom link for each one of your sessions that you're going to attend. Now you can like move between sessions if you want. But it's a nice way for folks just to be like, okay, like this is my schedule for the day. Here's all the links in one place that you don't have to go back to like calendar things, like invites on your calendar, or search for links or go to a website to find it. It's all right there in a nice little PDF that's sent to you by the folks organizing the meeting. At least I hope it works that way. So we'll see come September. So here's a question that I wish I knew the answer to, but maybe y'all can give some insight into what your organizations are doing. How far in the future are you all still planning to move events to a virtual platform? Maybe just your organizational policy, because none of us can know the future, but
I don't know exactly when. I mean, we pushed our in-person gala to fall of next year. But what I do believe is going to happen is that we're going to incorporate virtual into our roster of events anyway. Like there'll be some type of hybrid form of our in-person events and such. Because I think there's an audience for that. And like I mentioned before, I'm seeing names of people participating that I haven't seen before. And so I think the virtual space will become a part of our stuff. Just what that looks like yet, I don't know, but it will be a part of it.
Jesse, what's Age United's plan? Oh, you're on mute, Jesse.
How many times do we all say that a day? You're on mute. I was on a webinar taping on Monday that featured Dr. Fauci as the main guest. And I wish I had some great insight from him as recently as Monday, but I don't. But I'm getting the sense that we should all plan that there will be no in-person meetings for at least the first quarter of next year. I'm not saying that that's what we're going to do, but I think it's going to be very hard by the time we get to the end of the summer to expect that we're going to be doing in-person meetings, at least in the first quarter of next year. And I received an email today from a national faith-based organization that was planning its annual convention for next summer, and they're going virtual, and that would have been next July. It's a year from now. So I think that we're starting to take the long view, and I do think when we transitioned to AIDSWatch, we tried to give people as much lead notice as possible that it was going to go virtual, even in the constraints of just that 1 month of March. I think the more lead time you give people to know that something's not going to be in person, I think while there's so much uncertainty, it creates a reduction in the emotional barometer pressure level that, okay, I don't have to think about whether I'm going to actually go and get on a plane and be in a hotel 7 or 8 months from now. I don't have to think about that. And I think that that's something that for us, especially who are part of the public health infrastructure, it is helpful for us to be leaders in that. And so giving people as much notice as possible, I think is the right way to go.
So the next question, can you supply all the different platforms, software, apps, sites that you use for your virtual events other than Zoom? So the things that we've mentioned today, Instagram Live, Facebook Live, Zoom, of course. Lee, what was the platform you used?
It's called Be Live, BE Live.
Be Live. Okay. I think that was most of what we mentioned. I know Adrien talked in the beginning about the social media campaign that Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico used. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Did you use Twitter? Yeah. So the social media platforms. Yeah, I think that covers most of them. That's the end of the list of questions that I have. I want to see if there's anything from our panelists that that we haven't touched on that you have found to be super helpful or important in some of these virtual events and settings. Oh. There's more questions coming in now that I said we were out of questions. Okay, so before that, do you think it works better on Zoom than face-to-face? I hear that a lot more people prefer to be meeting on Zoom. And I think Adrien kind of touched on that a little bit about kind of the differences there. I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about that, Adrien.
I think it's just lots of different types of personalities, and even what we're seeing in our groups is some of it even ties to like neurodiversity. So I think that there are folks who are much more comfortable on Zoom, and there's a buffer there, and then there's the cons to it too, right? Like I know for me with my personality type, I often am on Zoom, sort of hesitating and worrying about, am I trying to say something right when somebody else was just about to try to say something, and who's interrupting and who's not interrupting, and that stuff can be really hard. So I think it's just very individual. I have found that there are definitely folks who prefer it and then other folks who don't. And it's just like being in person, right? There are people who don't want to be in a room of 20 people and don't tolerate that very well. And then others who love to be together with groups of people. So I think it's interesting to see that it can open up doors for some folks, and then for other people, it can feel really difficult to do conversations this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of our participants mentioned, they said Show Call was mentioned as a platform. Mamie, can you talk a little bit about Show Call?
The show called the production company, and so they're helping us produce our gala. So not so much a platform, but the production company. And we're using CauseVox to do the peer-to-peer fundraising component for it. Oh, I'm sorry, my little one.
That is fine. That's working from home, and that's Zoom. So
Daddy's not doing his job.
Okay, so that now we're out of questions. But I am curious if folks can share maybe like one last kind of takeaway thing that that you've learned or that you think is really important to pass on that maybe we haven't shared so far during today's session. And while you think about it, I'll say to our folks that are joining us, if any additional questions come in past this, we will pass those along to our presenters, and we can follow up with you individually about those questions. So I'll open it up to see if folks have kind of one parting thing that they want to share with folks about this this new reality of virtual events or virtual fundraisers.
You know, I made the joke earlier about mail being back, but it does keep, and I feel like it flowed to a couple of stories people shared. Like, I'm just really increasingly using my creative juices and obsessed with how we use mail to communicate with people right now, because it seems like both for fundraising, for promoting virtual events, a really relevant tool that allows us to get people's attention, be it a thank you gift, be it mailing them the component that you want them to use during the fundraiser, or mailing a promotional flyer, and have been really pushing with a lot of my colleagues that we should all be thinking really creatively about how we use, the US postal system, which we don't want to go down, or shipping things in general.
I think AIDS 2020, the International AIDS Conference, and HIV 2020, the Global HIV Conference, both happening in July, are probably resetting the bar for all of us in our arena for moving forward and what to expect from virtual events. The International AIDS Conference, had it been live and in person, would have had 15,000 people attending in one room, one complex, one conference center, and transitioning that to virtual so that people could still do learning, I think is really exciting. And the HIV 2020 similarly was, pulled together in less than a year, and it had a magnificent impact, and it has a series of activities happening over a series of months, so that it's not all about, you have to be live at one time to watch something. The learning can continue. So I think that, especially as we're seeing more things online and on television that are pre-recorded that would have been live, I think that the bar of creativity is also escalating, and the interaction between things that are fabulous, that are pre-recorded, that everyone sees together and has a unique experience around, are creating opportunities for us to live in this real 21st century world where we're being virtual, so that you can be connected across time zones and across wide geographic ranges. I think is what we are now challenged to help live up to and to create.
say strategically swing by the seat of your pants. You know, just do it. If I had continuously listened to myself, I probably would not have done the virtual events that we have done, and they were successful. So I say extend a little grace to yourself. Allow yourself to learn along the way and make a few mistakes, learn from them, but just jump in, just do it, and trust that you're going to make the right moves in partnering with your team and with experts out there that you can reach out to have a successful virtual event.
And for me, I think it is important to be innovative about all this stuff. And I think there's going to be a lot of learning that we get over this next several months from each other, and from what we are willing to experiment with. But for me, a lot of this really underscored a lot of back to basics stuff. I think we were surprised at the success of our online campaign, and what it illustrated for us was the 10 years that we've put in building relationships in our community and doing the work and having integrity. So there's some ways that your fundraising is always going to be tied to your reputation and what you do and the relationships that you build and cultivate and put the work into there. And I would also say for us, it's cultivating a really engaged and talented board, because our board of directors was a really integral part to the online campaign as well. And they have to be willing to send it out to their networks and to be part of it, to stand behind it. So, board cultivation and engagement is one of those things in nonprofits we could spend 3,000 years talking about, but it's a crucial piece of how you fund your organization as well.
Absolutely. So again, for the folks that are joining us today, there were a couple of questions that came in. They're pretty specific, so I think we will just follow up via email with you about that. I want to just say thank you so much to the folks that joined us. I want to say thank you to our amazing panelists. This has been so insightful and so informative, and I really, really appreciate y'all taking the time to be on Zoom for an hour and a half this afternoon and share your experiences with us. And of course, AIDS United is so grateful to be able to offer this series on COVID to the field and to the community. And we really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. We'll be sending out a recording of this session following this, and of course, following up directly with any questions that didn't get answered. And with that, I wish everyone a really great rest of your day. And I don't know, Jesse, if there's anything you want to say to close us out.
Well, I want to thank you and all of our panelists today, Adrien, Lee, and Mamie. Thank you for your partnership with AIDS United. And as we close, I noticed there was one last question in the Q&A about PowerPoint, and I was actually wanting to mention that because I think Adrien mentioned that we are neurodiversity in our community. I think we have to be even more careful when we're doing virtual events to not overload people with a lot of text on a screen. I saw plenary sessions at major conferences where graphs are shown that nobody can read because on your laptop it's even smaller, and you're like, well, what am I looking at? So being creative in this virtual world means not going back to the way things were, and being sure that what you are presenting in this new environment is as effective as it can possibly be. If it didn't work for you when you saw somebody else do it, it won't work when you do it for somebody else. And I think that we also need to get ourselves out of this mindset that we're going to get back to the old normal in 6 or 12 months. I don't think we're going to get back to the old normal. Instead, we're creating what is the new normal for now, and what may be an even more important new normal for the future. So living into the fact that this may be the way we are for a while, and it may be cheaper, faster, and more effective. And I love the fact that I can see Lee and Adrien and Mamie without having to get on a train. And why shouldn't we all? So let's embrace where we are. And actually, I think we can also have fun as Mamie said, raise a lot of money and share a lot of information at the same time. And with that, I say thank you for joining this webinar, and thank you for our panelists, and Zach, thank you. AIDS United is proud to present this webinar series as we all face the impact of COVID-19 and as we also work to create greater racial justice for our world and our nation. So thank you all. And Zach, back to you.
All right, thanks everyone. That's all we have for today. Follow up with you, but we wish you all a very good day and a great weekend ahead of you. So take care and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.